Lovely. Oh, it's a prop. Mr. Douglass met Mr. Lincoln face to face for the final time on March 4th, 1865. It was Inauguration Day. The day started out rainy and windy, but it eventually gave way to sunny and breezy. Mr. Douglass had found a place in the front and center of the crowd, and he was accompanied by Mrs. Thomas J. Dorsey, the former Miss Louise Tobias, wife of a successful Philadelphia caterer, real estate entrepreneur, and former slave. Mr. Douglass didn't say much about why he took her, but some scholars speculate it was because of her status in the Philadelphia black elite. At one point during the inaugural ceremony, President Lincoln tapped Vice President Andrew Johnson, and he pointed out Mr. Douglass, who was standing in the front. Mr. Douglass said that Johnson's true index of his heart was one of bitter contempt and aversion. And after he recovered his poise, his frown changed to a bland and sickly smile. Mr. Douglass suspected that Mr. Johnson was no friend of black people, and unfortunately, over the next few years, he would see that his hypothesis was correct. Johnson was drunk that day, and I've heard it said that sometimes alcohol has a way of, well, never mind. Mr. Douglass enjoyed Mr. Lincoln's speech. He said it sounded almost as if it was a sermon. He was surprised of its biblical foundations. Now, if you've never heard Mr. Lincoln's second inaugural, there are a couple of things you can do. You can pull it up online, or you can come to the Lincoln Memorial here in Washington, D.C., go straight up the stairs, and turn to your right. It takes up the entire wall. But that's not counted as the third meeting. Later that evening, Mr. Douglass attended the inaugural ball, once again accompanied by Mrs. Dorsey. Mr. Douglass joined the grand processional entering the White House reception. He later said that many other blacks had refused to join him because they were afraid of being rejected. Mr. Douglass said, "I had for some time looked upon myself as a man, but now in this multitude of the elite of the land, I felt myself a man among men." Mr. Douglass said that when he got to the front door of the White House guards took him rudely by the arm and ordered him to stand back. They told him that they could not admit any persons of color. Well, Mr. Douglass was not having it. The guards acted as if they were going to let him in, but then escorted the two of them towards another exit. Well, almost. Mr. Douglass got loud and asked for anyone to tell the president that he was there. When Mr. Lincoln saw Mr. Douglass, he said for all to hear, "Here comes my friend Douglass." Of course, Mr. Douglass got in. Mr. Lincoln told him he had seen him in the crowd early that day, and he was eager to hear what Mr. Douglass thought of his speech. Mr. Douglass was like, "Mr. President, you have a lot of people here who want to see you. Why don't you attend to your guest?" The president replied, "There is no man in the country whose opinion I value more than yours." Mr. Douglass told him that speech was a sacred effort. Now, there are 2 points that we can learn from this story. First, Mr. Douglass talked about other folk not accompanying him because they were afraid of rejection. Sometimes, in order to go places you've never gone before, you have to be willing to endure rejection. Second, Mr. Douglass knew his own worth. If you leave it up to other people to validate your worth, they are probably going to undervalue you. But Mr. Douglass knew he belonged in the inaugural ball. The reason why I have fun with this story is because this would be the last time that Mr. Douglass would see Mr. Lincoln. And he relished the opportunity to recall his 3 meetings with the president. And each meeting seemed to be greater than the one before. 6 weeks after the inaugural ball, General Robert E. Lee would surrender to General Ulysses S. Grant, and Washington, D.C. would experience joy and celebration which it had not experienced in 4 years, only to be overtaken by sudden sadness and mourning.